This is a CBS News special report. A federal appeals court in San Francisco has just declined to reinstate President Trump's temporary ban on refugees and on travel from 7 predominantly Muslim countries. Last week, a lower court stopped it and the Trump administration appealed. Our chief legal correspondent, Jan Crawford, is following this. Jan, what more do we know of the judge's decision?
Well, we've just gotten a copy of the opinion, 29 pages. It appears all 3 judges agree, there are no dissents, that they're not going to reinstate the travel ban, which means that an order by a lower court judge that suspended the ban nationwide will remain in place, while the government and the opponents argue about whether the Trump administration has the legal authority to impose that kind of executive order, temporarily suspending travel nationwide. Of course, the opponents, 2 states, Washington and Minnesota, had argued that the ban was unconstitutional. It violated due process, the First Amendment right to practice your religion freely. And that's when the judge suspended this order while they could argue about the merits of the case. The government immediately went to the appeals court and said, that the judge was out of line and that it should reinstate the travel ban while they hashed out these legal arguments. The appeals court just issuing this decision, refusing to grant the government's request. Now, the government at this point can go to the United States Supreme Court and try to get the court to reinstate the ban, but that is highly unlikely at this point, Scott. They're going to need 5 justices to agree to do so, and with that court divided now 4-4, remember one of those seats still is vacant, Justice Antonin Scalia, it's unlikely the court will intervene at this point. So that means it will go back to the lower courts while the parties will argue about the legality of this travel ban. This is not a decision on the merits. At the end of the day, the government could very well win, but they're going to have to make those arguments while the travel ban remains suspended.
Now, even yesterday, before this decision was made, President Trump ridiculed the judges on this court, saying that even a bad high school student could understand the law better than they could. Jan, remind us, the 2 states that filed the suit against the travel ban, what harm were they alleging?
Well, they were saying that the travel ban harmed the states themselves in getting money from tourism, but also the residents, people from these countries who had business in the states or grounds for being there, or relatives there who actually live there. So they said they had grounds to go into court and object to this travel ban. And the courts at this point have universally, in this litigation at least, agreed that they were right to be able to challenge it. Now, in making the arguments in the lower courts, the states said that this kind of wide-ranging ban, even though it's temporary, violated residents' rights to due process, to enter this country freely, and also discriminated against people based on their religion. They said it was flatly a Muslim ban, and they pointed to comments that President Trump actually made during the campaign. But the government argued, and it has good arguments here, that the president has wide discretion on matters of immigration and national security, not only under federal law, but under the Constitution, and that courts generally give broad deference to the president in matters of national security. Now, those are the arguments about the ban itself, and now that's what we're going to see play out in the lower courts. But the government said its case was so clear that the ban should be able to remain in place while they made those arguments. And at this point, the Ninth Circuit has said, no, we're going to keep it suspended.
Jan Crawford, our chief legal correspondent, this case almost undoubtedly headed to the Supreme Court. To repeat now, a federal appeals court in San Francisco has declined to reinstate President Trump's ban on refugees and on travel from 7 mostly Muslim nations. The travel in those cases will remain possible while this case is heard probably by the Supreme Court for a final decision. There'll be much more on all of this on your local station, on our streaming network, CBSN, and right here on the CBS Evening News. Until then, I'm Scott Pelley, CBS News in New York.
For news 24 hours a day, go to cbsnews.com.